A lot going on in the world, in the news. A couple of things that frankly concern me that I wanted to share with you. One, in the Senate, you've got the Blue Dog Coalition in the House. The House is famous for all its various caucuses. The Progressive Caucus was actually founded by Bernie Sanders, among others, but who is not a Democrat. But the Progressive Caucus in the House is the largest, I believe, of the Democratic caucuses in the House. But there's the yellow dogs and the blue dogs and a whole bunch of other dogs and whatever. Actually, I think that's it for the dogs. But there's all these different coalitions. In the Senate now, a group of Senate moderate Democrats have joined forces. They are led by Senator Evan Bayh, him of the DLC fame, Thom Carper, the Democrat from Delaware, Blanche Lincoln, the Democrat from Arkansas, and Ben Nelson, the Democrat from Nebraska, to form what they're calling the moderate Senate Democrats bloc. Now, in the Senate, this is really a very different thing from in the House, forming a bloc like this. This is really a power grab. This is an attempt to marginalize the progressives in the United States Senate. And frankly, I think that we need to be keeping an eye on these folks, and we need to be thinking about primary challenges to them, the way that Joe Lieberman was challenged in his primary, and he lost his primary in Connecticut. I'll just put it right out. Because what these guys are doing is they're basically joining up with the so-called moderate Republicans. And let's keep in mind the policy positions of today's so-called moderate Democrats are what were the Republican positions of the Nixon administration. And the radical liberal Democrats today are what the normal Democrats were during the Johnson administration, with the exception of the war. So, number one. And number two, this really concerns me. Seymour Hersh. Seymour Hersh has won the Pulitzer Prize for reporting. He's one of the most brilliant reporters of our day. He's been reporting on stories going back to Watergate. He has broken so many incredible stories. And yesterday, he was being interviewed, and he made the following comment. This was at a University of Michigan, I don't know what you call it, actually the University of Minnesota. It's called Great Conversations. And it was one of these, bring a couple of heavy hitters on and have them have a conversation. And somebody asked him this question. The event's moderator, Larry Jacobs, a political scientist from the University of Michigan, asked him this question about the Bush administration and Dick Cheney, and he said, first of all, he said it's going to be a year or two before he lays this out in his book. We've contacted him and tried to get him to come on the show, and he's just not doing media on this right now. Or if he is, he's saving it for probably the network television or something. But in any case, here's his quote. He says, after 9/11, he says, I haven't written about this yet, but the Central Intelligence Agency was very deeply involved in domestic activities. Now, keep in mind, the CIA, by its charter, is not allowed to function inside the United States. The FBI is the investigative agency in the United States. The CIA is external to the United States. So anyhow, back to Seymour Hersh. But the Central Intelligence Agency was very deeply involved in domestic activities against people they thought to be enemies of the state, without any legal authority for it. They have not yet been called on it. That does happen. He went on to say, right now today there was a story in the New York Times that, if you read it carefully, mentions something known as the Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC it's called. It was a special wing of our special operations community that was set up independently. They do not report to anybody, except in the Bush-Cheney days, they reported directly to Cheney's office. They did not report to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff or to Mr. Robert Gates, that would be the Secretary of Defense. They reported directly to him, that would be Cheney. Congress has no oversight of it. It's an executive assassination ring, essentially. And it's been going on and on and on. Just today in the Times, I'm still quoting Seymour Hersh, just today in the Times there was a story that its leaders A three-star general or admiral named William McRaven ordered a stop to it because there were so many collateral deaths. Now, wait a minute. We're talking the CIA operating inside the United States against people Dick Cheney deemed to be enemies of the state, causing collateral deaths? Well, then he seems to expand it. He says, under President Bush's authority, they've been going into countries, not talking to the ambassador, the CIA station chief, and finding people on a list and executing them and leaving. That's been going on in the name of all of us. So the executive assassination squad? What immediately came to mind for me, and perhaps I'm betraying a certain conspiracy mentality here, and if so, so be it. But what immediately came to mind to me was the contrast between Bernie Madoff and Ken Lay. These guys are both, Ken Lay was in his mid-60s, as I recall, late 60s. Bernie Madoff in his early 70s. They're both, of an age where they're reaching the end of their lives, more or less. They're both convicted of crimes. They're both guilty of major crimes. Bernie Madoff says, I ain't telling nothing. I'm taking my secrets to jail. And so he's let off to jail. Ken Lay says, I got some secrets for you guys. You want to cut a deal? Now keep in mind, it was Ken Lay whose private jet George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were flying around